Hello and welcome to Nia Scribbled. My name is Nia and this is my blog. In my first blog post titled What Are You Talking About? I spoke about the statistical programming analysis language software called R, and I mentioned some things, what it's used for, who uses it, and why I'm using it. I'm using it as part of my Methods and Research in Political Analysis module. How the module is broken down is we've got 4 tests to do over the semester, and in each test it's split up into 2 parts. The first part is we're given an R script to run and to work some questions, and then the second part of the test, is a multiple choice quiz. So I've just completed my test, my second test. I found it a lot harder than my first test, but why I've made this video here today, because I thought as a follow-on post from my last one, it would be a lot easier to show you guys what it is that I'm doing in R, and yeah, that it would be a lot easier and more interactive and more fun to see me using it. So here we go, I'll click into R now and we'll have a little look. Thank you for tuning in to Nia Scribbled. Okay, so here we are in R. First off to say, R is completely free for download. I put a link in my first blog post to download it. I think it's R project or something like that, Cram project. The link's in my first blog post anyway. And the data package that I'm using is free to download also. It's called PoliSciData and it can be loaded through R. What I'm using at the minute is RStudio. It's like a newer version of R, so lots of programs that are quite old or around the 90s or the 80s or even sometimes the 70s. A lot of these programs have been revamped so that you can actually click in places, because with coding language you just be using your keys and shortcuts in your keys. There's no clicking anywhere, but this is great. RStudio, you can have a little click around. So I'll say some quick things about R and try not to keep you guys too long. So this is my code editor, this is where I put in my code. This is my console where it kind of gives my output of my code. And this is my environment. There's like my data sets will pop up here and I can do some other stuff. And then I've got my plots and things down here where it'll show my graphs and things, or you can download packages here. So that's where I got my PoliSciData package from. Okay, so to get into it, there's a few things we always do whenever we start R. You tell R to remove everything from it so that you've got a nice, fresh, clean slate to start with. So if you see in here in green, these lines in green with a hash in the front of them, they're just names. So they're not telling R to do anything. That's you kind of leaving little flags for yourself for what your code means underneath. So this is our command to remove everything out of R. And then I've got some other things here. So I can run these before even starting anything. And so to run, you can click a certain line, you can highlight and click run, you can source, which will do all of your commands. So this is still loading here now because I'm loading the packages in the PoliSciData package, and they'll pop up here then in my global environment. But it still hasn't happened yet. I suppose maybe I'm running too many things here and my computer doesn't like me. Here we go, they're gonna pop up now. Okay, so this was one of my test questions. These are my questions that I got for my test that I submitted this week. I don't know if I've done these right yet, we'll find out next week, but just to kind of show you guys what it is that I'm doing. So my first question, okay, we'll say the world data includes variables that measure the GDP per capita of countries in 2008. And that's the name of our little variable. And whether or not countries are democracies, so democratic regime, it's a little question. Some political science theory suggests the following hypothesis. In a comparison of countries that are democratic have a higher GDP per capita than countries that are not democratic. It's just started hailing like crazy outside. You might not be able to hear me because I'm in a mobile home and I've got a tin roof. Okay, so my first part of the question is, apply the appropriate method of comparison for this type of dependent variable to test this hypothesis. So when we're trying to figure out what method of comparison for this type of dependent variable, so to figure out what type of variable your dependent variable is just having a look at it. So our dependent variable is GDP per capita. So we're saying that GDP changes whether or not if countries are democratic. So like democracy has an effect on GDP. So since democracy is the thing affecting GDP, our dependent variable is GDP because it's depending on democracy to do something to it, if that makes any kind of sense. That's the way I kind of work it in my head. So since my dependent variable is a numerical variable, so that's measuring the GDP per capita, I've got real numbers there I can work with. It's not kind of like democracy, yes or no. That's not a number question. So I know myself from studying this now that whenever your dependent variable is a numerical variable, you have to compare the means. So I've done this little command, comp means. It's telling me to go to my world data set, to take GDP cap out of that, to go to the world data set again, take democracy regime out of that. So I can hit run, and it'll give me a little means comparison table. So here, the mean of countries that aren't democratic, the mean of their GDP is around 9.5 grand. And then the ones who are democratic, it's up at 16,000 is their mean for GDP. So you can see there that countries that are democratic have higher GDPs. And then it asks us then produce a line chart illustrating the effect of democracy on GDP per capita. So this is another command, and we'll hit run here so I can show you what my graph looked like. My face is probably in the way. So this is the little graph I came up with. So this is just a really, really quick introduction to what I'm doing in R. And it's head-wrecking to me. It takes me a long time to get my head around these things, and trying again. I had many errors this week trying to get this script sorted, but I got there. The whole thing runs now, so if I hit source, it's gonna go and it's gonna run all my little commands and things that I've done. You can see different kind of graphs there popping up as it's running on down. So yeah. Thank you very much for tuning in to Nia Scribbled. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, if you'd like to have a chat, if you're in college and you have to keep a blog for college, or if you use a program like this, or if you use R, maybe you could give me some tips on how I'm using it and what I could do to improve my script. If you don't use R or anything, leave a comment with your thoughts about it. If you think, wow, this stuff's crazy, or if you think, I don't want anything to do with that. I've left a little poll in this blog, so you can tell me if you do use R or if you don't use R. I'm gonna park it at R this week, and next week move on to maybe a different module that I'm taking in college. So tune in next week to Nia Scribbled to find out what I'm scribbling about next week. And thank you very much for listening.